A millionaire spent every Christmas alone. Year after year, the same ritual of emptiness disguised his choice, until his new housekeeper invited him to dinner and changed everything. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. Hannah took a breath and walked over. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice soft, tentative. He turned, surprised to find her still there. She saw his face properly for the first time all afternoon. Handsome, yes, in that sharp, expensive way. They were the eyes of someone who had stopped expecting anything good. "I was just leaving, but I wanted to ask if you had plans tonight, for Christmas Eve." He blinked at her, as if she had asked the question in a foreign language. "Plans," he repeated. "Dinner plans," she clarified. "With family or friends." Something flickered across his face. "Oh, no plans. I usually just stay in." Only minutes before their conversation, Ethan had been pouring himself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost $800. He could not taste the difference between this and the $20 variety. But he bought it anyway because that was what successful people did. His phone lay dark on the marble counter. No calls, no messages. His mother, Margaret, was in the Hamptons with her society friends, her annual Christmas gala where appearance mattered more than anything resembling actual connection. His father had passed 5 years ago, and even when alive, the man had been more ghost than parent, buried in boardrooms and business deals. The penthouse stretched 40 floors above Manhattan, a glass castle suspended between earth and sky. Ethan walked to the window, wineglass in hand. His reflection stared back from the floor-to-ceiling windows, a man of 38 who looked both younger and infinitely older. On Christmas Eve, the city below pulsed with golden light, thousands of windows glowing with celebration, families gathering, children pressing faces against frosted glass.
He had achieved everything his father said mattered, and in achieving it all, he had lost something he could not name, could not quantify, could not buy back. Hannah Brooks had been cleaning the penthouse for 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks she had noticed everything. She noticed how the kitchen was spotless because it was never used. She noticed the bedroom looked like a hotel room because it held no personal belongings. She noticed the way Mr. Cole walked through his own home like a stranger passing through an airport terminal, touching nothing, connecting with nothing. Today, Christmas Eve, she had arrived for her regular Thursday shift and found him standing at the window, motionless, a glass of wine catching the late afternoon light. He had not moved in 20 minutes. She knew because she had been dusting the shelves behind him, trying to be invisible the way good housekeepers were supposed to be invisible, and he had not turned around once. Hannah was not like the other housekeepers who rotated through the homes of Manhattan's wealthy. She was 29, optimistic in ways that defied logic, and possessed an unfortunate habit of caring about people who were not supposed to be cared about in professional settings. Her mother always said it would get her in trouble. Her mother was probably right. She finished dusting and moved to the kitchen to gather her supplies. Mr. Cole still had not moved. Something about the stillness of him, the way he held himself so carefully together, made her chest tighten. She had seen loneliness before. She grew up in a small apartment in Brooklyn with too many people and too little money. But always there was noise and warmth and someone to talk to. This kind of loneliness was different. It was the loneliness of having everything and finding it meant nothing. Hannah stood at the kitchen counter, organizing her cleaning supplies, telling herself to leave. It was not her business. He was her employer. There were boundaries, professional boundaries, sensible boundaries. She put her supplies in her bag. She walked toward the door. She stopped. Against every reasonable instinct, against every warning her practical mind could offer, she turned back. Mr. Cole had not moved.
The sun was setting now, painting the city in shades of amber and rose, and he stood there like a statue, watching it all from behind glass. Hannah took a breath and walked over. "Mr. Cole?" she said, her voice soft, tentative. He turned, surprised to find her still there. She saw his face properly for the first time all afternoon. Handsome, yes, in that sharp, expensive way, but his eyes were what struck her. They were the eyes of someone who had stopped expecting anything good. "I was just leaving," Hannah continued, suddenly aware of how small she felt in this vast, cold space. "But I wanted to ask if you had plans tonight, for Christmas Eve." He blinked at her, as if she had asked the question in a foreign language. "Plans?" he repeated. "Dinner plans," she clarified. "With family or friends." Something flickered across his face. "Oh, no plans. I usually just stay in." Hannah nodded, her heart beating faster than it should. The sensible part of her brain was screaming at her to stop talking, to leave, to let this wealthy stranger spend his Christmas however he chose. But the other part of her, the part her mother blamed for every impulsive decision she had ever made, opened her mouth and said the words anyway. "Would you like to have dinner with my family? We live in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, just my mom, my sister, her kids. But there will be food, and probably too much noise, and it beats standing here alone staring at the city." The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but felt like hours. Ethan Cole stared at her with an expression she could not read. Shock, maybe? Confusion, certainly. And underneath it all, something that looked dangerously close to hope. Ethan could not remember the last time he had been to Brooklyn. Maybe college, some party in Williamsburg he had left early. Certainly never a neighborhood like this, where the buildings crowded together like old friends, where lights hung from fire escapes, and music drifted from open windows despite the December cold. He parked his Mercedes 2 blocks away, suddenly self-conscious about the car, about his coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent, about everything that marked him as other.
Hannah walked ahead, her breath visible in the cold air, completely at ease in a world that felt entirely foreign to him. The building had no doorman. The elevator was broken, so they climbed 4 flights of stairs, the walls covered in graffiti and children's drawings and layers of paint that told the story of decades. Hannah chatted as they climbed, telling him about her nephews, warning him that dinner would be chaotic, apologizing in advance for the noise. Ethan barely heard her. His heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the stairs. When was the last time he had been nervous about meeting people? Business meetings never fazed him. He could walk into a boardroom full of hostile investors and remain perfectly calm. But this, climbing stairs to have dinner with strangers, made his hands sweat. Hannah stopped at a door marked 4C. From inside came the sound of children laughing, someone singing along to Christmas music, and the clatter of dishes. She turned to him with a smile that was both excited and slightly nervous. "Ready?" she asked. He was not ready. He would never be ready. He nodded anyway. The door opened and warmth rushed out like a physical thing. Not just heat, though the apartment was warm after the cold stairwell, but something else. Something that had been missing from his life so long he had forgotten it existed. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, crashed into Hannah's legs with a shriek of joy. "Aunt Hannah, you came! You came!" Hannah laughed and scooped him up. "Of course I came, silly! When do I ever miss Christmas?" Over the boy's shoulder, she caught Ethan's eye. "This is my boss, Mr. Cole. He is joining us for dinner." The boy looked at Ethan with frank curiosity. "Do you like mac and cheese?" he asked, the most important question in the world. "I do," Ethan said, surprising himself with the truth of it. He liked mac and cheese. When had he last eaten mac and cheese? The apartment was small, impossibly so by the standards of his penthouse. The kitchen opened directly into the living room, where a Christmas tree leaned slightly to one side, covered in ornaments that looked homemade and mismatched and perfect. A woman in her 50s emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, her face lighting up when she saw Hannah.
Baby girl, you made it, and you brought a guest. She looked at Ethan with warm, assessing eyes. Any friend of Hannah's is welcome here. I am Maria. You must be starving. Before Ethan could respond, he was ushered further inside, his coat taken, a glass of something red pressed into his hands. The apartment buzzed with activity. Hannah's sister, Claire, greeted him while bouncing a toddler on her hip. The nephew who loved mac and cheese, whose name was apparently Jason, immediately began showing Ethan his collection of toy cars. Another child, a girl named Sophia, was shy but watched him with intense curiosity from behind the tree. Dinner was not served at a dining table because there was no dining table, at least not one large enough for everyone. They ate in the living room, plates balanced on laps, sitting on mismatched furniture and floor cushions. The food was simple. Roasted chicken that Maria insisted was not as good as last year's because the oven temperature was never consistent. Mac and cheese, as promised. Green beans that the children mostly avoided. Bread rolls from the bakery down the street. And for dessert, a chocolate cake that Claire had made, slightly lopsided, but decorated with so much love it did not matter. Ethan sat on the floor next to Jason, his expensive suit probably ruining, his wine replaced with cheap beer, and felt something crack open inside his chest. This was what he had been missing. Not the food, though the food was better than anything his private chef had ever made. Not the apartment, though there was something beautiful about the warmth and clutter. It was this. Connection without transaction. Laughter without agenda. People who existed in each other's lives simply because they chose to, because love required nothing except presence. Hannah caught his eye from across the room. She was sitting with Sophia in her lap, helping the little girl eat cake. Chocolate smeared on both their faces. She smiled at him, a question in her eyes. "Are you okay?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. He was not okay. He was devastated. He was transformed. He was a man who had just realized how much of his life had been spent in a beautiful prison of his own making. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and the children were drowsy with sugar and contentment, Hannah found him standing by the window, looking out at Brooklyn's modest skyline. "You are quiet," she said. "I'm thinking," he replied. About how I have been doing everything wrong." She did not ask him to explain. Maybe she understood already. Maybe she had known from the moment she invited him, from the moment she saw him standing alone in his glass tower, that he needed this more than he needed anything money could buy. Ethan woke on Hannah's family couch with a crick in his neck and a feeling he could not immediately identify. Sunlight streamed through thin curtains. Somewhere in the apartment, a child was giggling. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. He sat up slowly, disoriented. His suit jacket hung over a chair. Someone, probably Maria, had covered him with a knitted blanket at some point during the night. He remembered the evening extending longer than planned, talking with Hannah until late, her mother insisting he should not drive home so late. Just stay. They had a couch. It was Christmas. He had stayed. Ethan Cole, who owned a penthouse worth $8 million, had slept on a second-hand couch in Brooklyn and felt more rested than he had in years. Hannah appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Good morning," she said with an amused smile. "You snore, by the way." "I do not snore," he protested automatically. "Okay." She handed him a mug, her eyes dancing with laughter. "You breathe very loudly while sleeping. Is that better?" He took the coffee, still marveling at how easy she was to be around, how she lacked the careful performance that everyone in his world maintained at all times. She wore sweatpants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup, completely unguarded. She was the most beautiful person he had ever seen. They sat on the couch together, drinking coffee while the apartment slowly came to life around them. Maria emerged to start breakfast. Claire stumbled out of the bedroom looking exhausted but happy. The children appeared one by one, still in pajamas, demanding cereal and cartoon time.
Ethan sat in the middle of the domestic chaos and felt lighter than air. When was the last time he had eaten breakfast that was not a protein shake consumed at his desk? When was the last time he had sat still, doing nothing productive, just existing in the moment? Hannah kept stealing glances at him, as if checking to make sure he was real, that he had not vanished like a dream. Eventually she said, "You do not have to stay. I know you probably have things to do." "I have nothing to do," he said, and the truth of it was staggering. It was December 25th, his office was closed, his mother would not notice his absence, he literally had nothing scheduled, nowhere to be, no obligations except the ones he chose. So he chose this. He stayed for breakfast. Pancakes that Jason insisted on making, which meant they were lumpy and slightly burnt, but tasted perfect. He stayed for the gift opening, watching the children tear through wrapping paper with unbridled joy. When Sophia handed him a candy cane and announced it was his present, he felt his throat tighten with emotion. Later, when Hannah walked him to his car, both of them reluctant for the morning to end, she stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know it was probably weird. My family can be a lot." "It was not weird," Ethan said. "It was the best Christmas I have had in 10 years. She looked up at him, something shifting in her expression, a moment hanging between them full of possibility. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to ask when he could see her again. He wanted to tell her that she had done something to him, cracked something open, let light into places that had been dark so long he forgot light existed. Instead, he said, "Can I take you to lunch sometime? Outside of work, I mean, as friends." "Friends," Hannah repeated, her smile both pleased and slightly disappointed. "Sure, I would like that." He drove back to Manhattan feeling like a different person. The penthouse, when he opened the door, felt like a mausoleum. Everything too clean, too quiet, too carefully arranged to look like success. He stood in his spotless kitchen and thought about Maria's chaotic, warm cooking space. He looked at his pristine living room and thought about Jason's toy cars scattered across worn carpet. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Cole realized that everything he had built, everything he had achieved, meant absolutely nothing. And instead of terrifying him, the realization felt like freedom. The restaurant was Ethan's choice, which meant it was exactly the kind of place Hannah had only seen in movies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, tables spaced so far apart you could not hear other conversations, waiters in suits more expensive than anything in her closet. Hannah had agonized over what to wear. Her nicest dress, bought second-hand but in good condition, suddenly felt shabby when surrounded by women wearing diamonds and designer labels. She held her head high anyway. She was not ashamed of who she was, even if everything about this place whispered that she did not belong. Ethan stood when she approached, his face lighting up in a way that made her stomach flip. "You look beautiful," he said, and meant it. "You look rich," she replied, because humor was her defense mechanism, and he laughed, surprised and delighted. Lunch was easy at first. They talked about everything and nothing. He asked about her family, genuinely interested in the stories about her nephews and her mother's neighborhood gossip. She asked about his business, trying to understand a world where people moved millions of dollars based on instinct and spreadsheets. But halfway through their meal, everything changed. Hannah saw her first, a woman approaching their table with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she belonged everywhere. Tall, elegant, ice-blonde hair styled in perfect waves, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Hannah's monthly rent. She moved like a shark that had scented blood. "Victoria," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is Hannah. Hannah, this is Victoria Hale, an old friend." "Friend," Victoria repeated, her smile sharp enough to cut. "Is that what we are calling it now?" She turned her attention to Hannah, her eyes cataloging every detail, every imperfection, every sign that Hannah was out of her depth.
"And who are you, dear? A colleague of Ethan's?" "A friend," Hannah said firmly, meeting Victoria's gaze directly.
How sweet! Victoria's smile did not reach her eyes. Ethan has always had such a generous heart, always picking up strays, supporting charitable causes. It is one of his most endearing qualities. The words landed like a slap. Hannah felt her face grow hot, not with embarrassment but with anger. She understood perfectly what Victoria was implying. That she was charity, that whatever this was, this tentative friendship or possible something more, it was Ethan performing generosity rather than genuine connection. Hannah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against expensive flooring. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tight. "I need some air." She was halfway to the door when Ethan caught up with her. "Hannah, wait, please." She spun around, and he saw tears in her eyes, though whether for hurt or rage he could not tell. "Is that what this is?" she demanded. "Some kind of project? Rich guy helps poor girl, feels good about himself?" "No," Ethan said urgently. "God, no." "Hannah, Victoria is my ex. She is bitter and cruel, and she said those things to hurt you, to hurt both of us." "Why would she want to hurt us?" Hannah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because she sees what I see," Ethan said quietly, "that you are remarkable, that spending time with you has made me happier than I have been in years, that if she could not make me feel this way, she cannot stand the idea of anyone else doing it." Hannah searched his face, wanting to believe him, afraid to believe him. But even if he was sincere, even if this was real, Victoria had exposed the fundamental problem neither of them wanted to acknowledge. They came from different worlds. His world would never fully accept her, and she did not know if she could handle being looked at the way Victoria had looked at her, like something quaint and temporary and easily dismissed. "I need to think," Hannah said finally. "I need some time." She left him standing in front of the restaurant, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking lost in a way that money could never fix. Margaret Cole's penthouse made her sons look modest by comparison. Located in the most exclusive building on the Upper East Side, it was a monument to old money, good taste, and the kind of social power that came from generations of privilege.
Ethan sat in his mother's living room, a room that looked like a museum exhibit, and waited for the lecture he knew was coming. Margaret swept in like a force of nature, impeccably dressed even at home, her posture perfect, her expression carefully controlled in that way he had learned from childhood meant she was furious. "Victoria paid me a visit," Margaret began without preamble. "She had some interesting things to tell me about your recent activities." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Of course Victoria had gone to his mother. Why had he expected anything different? "I am not interested in Victoria's opinion of my life," Ethan said carefully. "Really?" Margaret sat across from him, her back ruler straight. "Because her opinion seems quite relevant when she is telling me you are dating your housekeeper. Please tell me that is not true." "Hannah is not my housekeeper anymore," Ethan said. "I asked her to stop working for me weeks ago, specifically because I wanted to see her outside of that context." "That does not make it better, Ethan. That makes it worse." His mother's voice was ice cold now. "Do you have any idea how this looks? What people will say?" "I do not care what people say." "Well, you should." Margaret stood, pacing to the window, her movements precise and controlled. "Your father built Cole Capital on reputation, trust, the confidence of our investors that we represent stability, good judgment, sound decision-making. What message does it send when you, the CEO, the face of this company, are consorting with someone so obviously beneath your station?" "Beneath my station?" Ethan repeated,
anger rising in his chest. "Hannah has more integrity, more genuine kindness, more real worth than anyone in our social circle, including Victoria, including you." Margaret turned sharply, her eyes flashing. "Do not speak to me that way. I am your mother. I have your best interests at heart." "No," Ethan said, standing to face her. "You have the company's interests at heart. You have the family reputation's interests at heart. You have never, not once, asked me what would make me happy." "Happiness is a luxury," Margaret snapped. "Responsibility is what matters. Your father understood that. Why can you not?" "Maybe I do not want to be like my father," Ethan said quietly.
Maybe I do not want to spend my life building an empire and dying alone, never having loved anyone, never having been loved. Maybe I want something real." "Then you are a fool," Margaret said coldly. "This woman, this Hannah, she will not fit into your world. She will embarrass you. She will become a burden. And when this infatuation fades, and it will fade, you will be left with damaged relationships and a tarnished reputation." "Or maybe," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the anger and hurt churning inside him, "maybe she will teach me how to be human again. Maybe that is worth more than anything you value." He left his mother's penthouse, knowing he had crossed a line but could not be uncrossed. He had made his choice. Now he had to live with the consequences. 3 days later, Hannah received a letter informing her that her cleaning services were no longer needed at any properties managed by the Cole family or their associated businesses. The letter was cold, professional, and utterly devastating. She had lost her primary source of income. She had lost it because of him. When Ethan called, she did not answer. When he showed up at her apartment, her mother told him Hannah did not want to see him. When he sent flowers, they were returned with a note in Hannah's handwriting. "Please leave me alone." Ethan stood in his empty penthouse and realized that in trying to protect her, in trying to be with her, he had destroyed everything. Hannah stood behind her folding table at the Christmas market in Union Square, her breath visible in the December air, and tried to smile at potential customers. Before her sat rows of cupcakes, cookies, brownies, all baked in her mother's kitchen using recipes passed down through generations. She had started this 3 weeks ago, after losing her cleaning jobs, after realizing she needed income and refusing to sink into despair. Business was slow but steady. She made enough to contribute to her mother's rent, enough to buy groceries, enough to keep hope alive that maybe, someday, this could become something bigger. A real bakery, a cafe where people felt welcome. The dream she had carried since she was a little girl watching her grandmother bake bread. But on bad days, when the wind cut through her coat and customers passed by without stopping, she thought about Ethan, wondered where he was, wondered if he thought about her, wondered if that brief moment of connection had been real or just a fantasy they had both wanted to believe. She had not answered his calls because she did not know what to say. She had not let him explain because she was afraid the explanation would hurt worse than the silence. What future could they possibly have? He lived in glass towers among people who saw her as nothing. She lived paycheck to paycheck in a walk-up apartment, trying to build something from nothing. Better to cut it off now, she told herself. Better to hurt cleanly than to slowly watch something beautiful get destroyed by reality. But late at night, lying in her childhood bedroom, she thought about the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was remarkable, like he had been waiting his whole life to find someone who saw him as more than a bank account. Maybe that was the cruelest part. Not the loss of income, not the humiliation of being dismissed, but knowing that he had been real, that they had been real, and it still had not been enough. Across town, in a corner office 40 floors above Manhattan, Ethan sat through another board meeting and felt absolutely nothing. The numbers on the screen meant nothing. The graphs showing projected growth meant nothing. The congratulations from his partners about closing a major deal meant nothing. Ryan Parker, his business partner and closest friend, cornered him after the meeting. "What is going on with you?" Ryan demanded. "You have been like a ghost for weeks." "I'm fine," Ethan said automatically. "You are not fine. You are miserable." Ryan studied him with the kind of perception that came from 20 years of friendship. "This is about that woman, is it not? The one Victoria mentioned?" "Her name is Hannah," Ethan said quietly. "Okay, Hannah." Ryan leaned against the desk, his expression shifting from concern to something like understanding. "Are you in love with her?" Ethan had not let himself use that word, even in his own mind. Love felt too big, too dangerous, too likely to destroy him if he acknowledged it and lost it. But sitting there in his perfect office with his perfect view, he could not deny it any more. "Yes," he said, "I think I am."
"Then why are you here?" Ryan asked simply. "Why are you sitting in this office pretending everything is normal when the person you love is out there somewhere probably thinking you chose this," Ryan gestured around the office, "over her?" "Because I do not know how to fix it," Ethan admitted. "Because my mother destroyed her livelihood. Because people like Victoria will always see her as less. Because I do not know how to protect her from my world." "Maybe she does not need protecting," Ryan suggested gently. "Maybe she just needs you to show up, to choose her publicly, loudly, in a way that makes it clear you are not ashamed and you are not going to let anyone treat her as less than she is." "And if that destroys the business," Ethan asked, "if investors lose confidence, if my mother cuts me off?" Ryan smiled. "Then you will still have the most important thing. You will have something real. And honestly, Ethan, you have been half dead for years. If this woman brought you back to life, maybe everything else is worth burning down." Ethan looked at his friend, his partner, the person who understood the business better than almost anyone. "And you would be okay with that? Risking everything we built?" Ryan shrugged. "We will build it again, or we will build something different. But I would rather work with someone who is actually living than watch you slowly turn into your father." The words hit like a physical blow. His father, who had died alone in a hotel room during a business trip, surrounded by luxury and utterly devoid of love. His father, who had built an empire and left nothing behind except money and regret. Ethan stood abruptly. "I need to go." "Finally," Ryan said with a grin. "Go find her, and this time do not take no for an answer." It took Ethan 3 days to find her. Hannah was not answering her phone. Her mother refused to tell him anything except that Hannah was working hard and did not need distractions. He almost gave up, almost convinced himself that maybe she was better off without him. Then Ryan casually mentioned seeing a woman who looked just like the photo on Ethan's desk, selling baked goods at the Union Square holiday market. Ryan claimed it was a coincidence. Ethan did not believe him and did not care. The market was crowded with last-minute holiday shoppers. Strings of lights hung between vendor stalls, casting everything in a warm glow. The air smelled of roasted nuts, hot cider, and cold winter air. Ethan moved through the crowd, his heart pounding, his expensive coat drawing occasional stares, but mostly ignored in the anonymous flow of the city. Then he saw her. Hannah stood behind a modest table, her hands cupped around a thermos of something hot, her nose red from the cold. She wore a knit hat with a ridiculous pom-pom on top and looked absolutely perfect. For a moment, he just watched her, watched the way she smiled at customers, the way she carefully wrapped each purchase like it was a gift, the way she chatted with a little girl about which cookie looked the tastiest. She had built this, lost everything, and built something new from determination and talent and refusing to be defeated. He loved her so much it hurt to breathe. Ethan approached the table. Hannah looked up, saw him, and froze. For a long moment they just stared at each other while people flowed around them, oblivious to the universe-altering conversation about to happen. "What are you doing here?" Hannah asked, finally, her voice carefully neutral. "I will buy all of them," Ethan said, gesturing to the baked goods on her table. She blinked. "What?"
Everything. Every cupcake, every cookie, every brownie. I will buy all of it. Name your price." Hannah's expression shifted from surprise to anger. "You cannot just buy me, Ethan. You cannot throw money at this and make it better." "I am not trying to buy you," he said urgently. "I am trying to support you. I am trying to show up. I am trying to demonstrate that I see what you built, and I think it is remarkable." "I do not need your charity," Hannah said, her voice tight. "This is not charity, Ethan. This is me trying to figure out how to apologize, how to make it right, how to convince you that I am not my mother. I am not Victoria. I am just someone who has been sleepwalking through life for years until you woke me up, and I do not want to go back to sleep."
People were starting to notice them now, the conversation drawing attention. Hannah glanced around, self-conscious, then looked back at him. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "I want another chance," Ethan said. "I want to take you to dinner. I want to meet you here after you are done for the day and carry your supplies home. I want to help you figure out how to turn this," he gestured to her table, "into the cafe you deserve to own. I want to introduce you to everyone I know and make it clear that you are not a secret or a charity case or anything except someone I admire more than anyone I have ever met." Hannah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Your mother will hate it. Your investors will question your judgment. People like Victoria will always see me as the help." "I know," Ethan said, "and I do not care. Or rather, I care about you more than I care about their opinions. If I have to choose between their approval and your presence in my life, I choose you. Every time, I choose you." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity, for proof that he meant what he said. Then, slowly, her expression softened. "You really do not snore," she said finally. He laughed, the sound surprised and relieved. "I told you. And you really think we can make this work? With all the differences, all the complications?" "I think we can try," Ethan said. "I think trying is worth it. Even if we fail, even if it gets messy, I would rather have tried with you than succeeded at anything else." Hannah wiped her eyes, smiled despite herself. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we can try." Ethan wanted to kiss her right there in the middle of the holiday market, but settled for helping her pack up her supplies, carrying her containers like they were precious cargo, following her onto the subway toward Brooklyn like a man who had finally found his way home. The New Year's Eve gala was exactly the kind of event Ethan usually avoided. But this year he had convinced Hannah to come with him, to stand at his side publicly. Hannah wore a navy dress she bought herself, refusing his offers to pay. She looked nervous but determined as they entered the ballroom, her hand tight in his. The evening was going well until Victoria appeared in red silk, her smile predatory. "Ethan," she purred, "and Hannah, how domestic." But Victoria had not come for pleasantries. She had come to destroy. "I have been enjoying your company secrets," she said, her voice carrying just far enough that nearby conversations paused. "Your client lists, your investment strategies. I have been feeding your proprietary information to your competitors for months." Ethan stared at her, stunned. Victoria had committed corporate espionage and stood there admitting it publicly, confident her connections would protect her. Before Ethan could respond, Hannah stepped forward. "That is interesting," Hannah said calmly, "because the Securities and Exchange Commission might be very interested in hearing about those leaks." Victoria's smile faltered. "You have no proof." "Actually, we do," Hannah continued with perfect confidence. "When Ethan told me what was happening, I suggested he hire a cybersecurity firm. They have been monitoring everything for weeks. Your emails, your meetings with competitors, everything." It was a bluff. They had hired no one, but Hannah delivered the lie with such conviction that Victoria's face went pale. The silence in the ballroom was absolute.
Victoria had come to humiliate Hannah and instead found herself trapped by her own arrogance. She fled from the ballroom without another word. Ethan turned to Hannah, his expression somewhere between awe and terror. "Please tell me we actually hired investigators?" "We did not," Hannah admitted. "But we will Monday morning. People like her always leave trails." They left the gala early, hand in hand. As they stepped into the cold January air, Ethan realized something fundamental had shifted. Hannah had shown him that real power had nothing to do with money or connections. Real power was knowing who you were and refusing to let anyone make you feel small. The investigation confirmed everything. Victoria had been sloppy, certain her connections would protect her. They did not. Within weeks, she faced federal charges and disappeared quietly. But the real confrontation came when Margaret summoned her son. They sat in her pristine living room, and she wasted no time. "You embarrassed our family," Margaret began. "You allowed that woman to create a public spectacle."
"That woman saved the company," Ethan said evenly. "Hannah exposed a traitor and prevented further damage." "She is manipulating you," Margaret insisted, "using you for your money, your status." "You mean intelligent women? Women with integrity? Women who value people over appearances?" "I mean women who do not belong in our world," Margaret snapped. "You are going to stop this ridiculous infatuation before it destroys everything your father built." Ethan stood, suddenly calm. "No, I am going to marry Hannah if she will have me. I am going to stop pretending that your approval matters more than my happiness." Margaret's face went white. "If you do this, I will cut you off. I will remove you from the family trust." "Then do it," Ethan said quietly. "Because I already made my choice, and between Hannah's love and your conditional approval, it is not even close." He walked out, feeling lighter than air. He called Hannah immediately. "Stay there," he said. "I am coming over. I need to ask you something." He arrived breathless, still in his suit. Hannah was in the kitchen, wearing an apron. Ethan took her hand, pulled her into the living room, and dropped to one knee. "What are you doing?" Hannah stared at him in shock. "Something I should have done weeks ago," Ethan said. "I just told my mother that I am going to marry you if you will have me. I do not have a ring. I did not plan this. But I care about building a life that feels real, about waking up every day next to someone who makes me want to be better." "You are insane," Hannah whispered. "Probably," Ethan agreed. "So what do you say?" Hannah pulled him to his feet, laughing through tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you ridiculous man. Of course, yes." He kissed her while Maria cheered in the kitchen and her nephews peeked around the doorway. It was not romantic by traditional standards, no violinist, no expensive restaurant, but it was real. It was them, and it was perfect. 6 months later, Hannah stood in front of a small storefront in Brooklyn and felt her heart might explode with joy. The space was modest, but it was hers. Well, theirs. She called it Second Chances, because that is what it represented. The interior was warm and welcoming. Mismatched furniture from thrift stores, shelves with books customers could borrow, local art on the walls. And behind the counter, a commercial espresso machine that Ethan insisted on buying. They had compromised. Ethan wanted to fund everything. Hannah wanted to build it herself. They settled on a business loan with formal terms and repayment schedules. The cafe opened on a Saturday. The line stretched down the block. Maria worked the register. Claire helped in the kitchen.
Even the nephews had jobs, Jason arranging pastries while Sophia drew chalk art on the sidewalk sign. Ethan showed up mid-morning wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He slipped behind the counter and kissed Hannah's cheek. "Where do you need me?" She handed him an apron. "Start on dishes." He laughed and went to work. Ethan Cole, washing dishes in a Brooklyn cafe because the woman he loved needed help. Ryan stopped by with his family. He pulled Ethan aside. "You look happy." "I am happy," Ethan confirmed. "Margaret's still not speaking to you?" Ethan shrugged. "Her loss. Maybe someday. Maybe not. I have made my peace with it." That evening, after closing, Hannah and Ethan sat on the floor, surrounded by receipts. They had exceeded projections, broken even on the first day. "We did it," Hannah said, leaning against his shoulder. "We did it together," Hannah insisted. "That is the point." Ethan wrapped his arm around her. This morning, a woman came in who had just lost her job. She was trying not to cry. I gave her cake and told her we were hiring. She filled out an application right there. Hannah smiled. "See? You were learning." "Learning what?" "How to be human," she said. "How to see people. How to connect." "You taught me that," Ethan said quietly. "Everything I thought mattered was actually just decoration. The real stuff is in moments like this, sitting on the floor of a cafe, counting money with someone you love, knowing you built something good together."
December came fast. The cafe transformed for the holidays, with lights, a small tree, garland. Hannah instituted a tradition. Anyone who could not afford a meal on Christmas Eve could eat free. Christmas Eve morning, the cafe was packed. Families celebrating, individuals finding belonging. The smell of gingerbread filled the air. Ethan worked beside Hannah, making drinks, chatting with customers. A year ago, he would have been alone in his penthouse. Now he was covered in flour, laughing with Jason, helping Sophia decorate cookies. As evening approached, the cafe door opened. Margaret Cole stood in the doorway looking profoundly uncomfortable and deeply uncertain. Ethan froze. Hannah grabbed his hand and squeezed. Margaret approached slowly, taking in the cafe. "Your father would have hated this place," Margaret said quietly. Ethan stiffened. But then Margaret continued. "He would have hated how unpretentious it is, how messy, how real." She paused, something shifting in her expression. "But he would have been wrong, and I was wrong. This is lovely. You are both lovely." It was not exactly an apology, but it was something. A beginning. "Would you like some coffee?" Hannah offered gently. "Maybe some pie. It is pecan, my grandmother's recipe." Margaret hesitated, then nodded. "I would like that very much." They sat together at a table by the window. Outside, snow began to fall. They talked about small things at first, then gradually deeper. It was not perfect. There was still distance to close, wounds to heal, but it was a beginning. That night, after Margaret left, promising to return, after the cafe was cleaned and locked, Ethan and Hannah walked home through the snow. Not to his penthouse, which he had sold months ago, but to their apartment, where they had built a life together. Hannah stopped him under a streetlight. "Merry Christmas," she said. Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know we are already engaged, but I wanted you to have this." Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, beautiful because it was thoughtful, chosen for her. She let him slip it onto her finger. "I love you," she said. "I love the life we built. I love that you wash dishes and argue about spreadsheets and burn cookies when you try to help bake." "I love you too," Ethan said.
I love that you took a chance on a lonely stranger, that you invited him to dinner and changed everything, that you taught me what actual wealth looks like. They kissed in the snow in the middle of Brooklyn, surrounded by warm neighborhood windows and distant Christmas carols. A year ago, Ethan had been alone in a tower, convinced he had everything and feeling empty. Now he had less money, more complications, and felt richer than he ever imagined possible. They walked home through the snow, hand in hand, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ruins of their separate loneliness. Because this was what Hannah had taught him, that home was not a place. Home was waking up next to someone who saw you completely and chose you anyway. Home was building something together, messy and imperfect and absolutely worth every sacrifice. A millionaire spent every Christmas alone until his housekeeper invited him to dinner and changed everything. Not just for that one night, but forever. Because sometimes love finds you in the most unlikely places. Sometimes the person who saves you is the person you least expect. And sometimes the greatest wealth you can achieve has nothing to do with what you own, and everything to do with who you love.